Hello, dear viewers. We're in another show of the series The Solution, where we're learning the method of Bala Sulam based on the next generation writings of Bala Sulam. Hello, Rev Laitman, and here are my friends. I wanted to ask you, Rev Laitman, we spoke in the previous shows about the interdependence between everyone. If I went to the supermarket and I thought, if there's someone who is a supplier, brings his things to the supermarket, I pay for them, I buy. There's perfect interdependence. He's dependent, I'm dependent on his products, he's dependent on what I'm giving in exchange. Where's the sensitivity in this, that he's looking after me and I'm looking after him? The connections, why isn't this level interdependence? It's interdependence is that I am dependent on your situation and you're dependent on my situation without any difference whether it's yours or mine. What does that mean? I don't understand. I understand that you don't understand. That always happens, but still, if you can explain. I really thought that mother is dependent on her child. Is he dependent on me buying the product? Of course. We're neighbors. In my garden, I do fires and all kinds of stuff. Or even I bring big trees and stuff and hide his garden. I don't care. I do it in my garden. And he claims that I'm causing something. The question is, interdependence means that I feel him, his desire, his situation, like my situation. And the same goes for him. That's mutuality. Mutuality doesn't mean that we're together on the planet. I am polluting over there, and you're suffering here. It's clear, but it's not interdependence. It's interdependence, yes, but not mutual. Yours is mine and mine is yours. It's really like that. It turns out that it's the same thing to the extent that it's dependence, like parents and children, where they have natural interdependence. I'm dependent on my kids. They feel good, I feel good. They feel bad, I feel bad. Why? Because there's a connection between us. It's not I determine, it's nature. But in our case, now we have interdependence. Nature has determined that there is a connection between us, but there's no feeling there. So therefore, despite us saying that we're dependent on one another, we're not capable of maintaining this connection. I'm missing the sensitivity. So when I buy the product, I need to think. That won't help you thinking about the supplier, the date, all the people working on it. No, it won't help. It won't help. Until you won't acquire within you the feeling that we're together, that we're connected to one another. Connected in such a way that what I feel, you feel. To the extent that if we're really talking about the integral system where there's no difference between all the parts, they belong to the body. And the head that's managing all the parts is actually managing them together equally, as equals. I want to tell you what the problem is. Like today, in the interdependence, everyone will agree that there's interdependence and your dependence. Hang on, let me organize my question. Let's say I have a factory. Of course, I'm dependent on my employees and suppliers and equipment. Don't call that interdependence. Let's call it dependence. It's also not dependence. It's a connection between everyone. The fact that I'm selling to someone and he's selling to someone else, and that's how it is around the world. It's mutual. If he doesn't come to work, then I don't have employees. It's not what we mean when we use that term. Interdependence means a mother dependent on her kids because love connects us. This love enslaves her, obligates her to serve them. That's called dependence. Like she is dependent on them. Actually, there's no dependence here. She's free. She's big. A free person. She can buy herself a ticket and fly all over the world. Can she allow that if she has kids at home? No. That's called dependence. It's not you and me and do things on account of others. We can only take into account our profit. That's what I want to ask you. Okay, it's not interdependence. Okay, let's assume. Just for the question, let's call it interdependence, the connection between the owner of the business and its workers. As an owner, I'm willing to pay their salary for them to come to work. You're not paying the salary. That's the dependence. You have no choice. You have to pay the salary. But what's happening, on the one hand, we have these relations between us. And on the other hand, Baal HaSulam is talking about as the owner, my personal interest as the owner overcomes the interest of equality, of equal distribution. And I prefer my personal interest, even though I understand there's interdependence in this whole system. It's really funny when you're saying this word. It's light years away from what this term has really come to explain to us. So how can I use it? I'm trying to understand. We talked about when we're talking about equality, the people who don't have will be very happy, but the people who have, there's a problem with them. Baal HaSulam says the millionaires, there's no problem. He wants to bring the world in a nice, gradual manner. Without bloodshed and revolts and everything, and blows from nature. Nature will advance us to a situation where we'll have to come to equality. That's what's being revealed as the necessary level, the necessary format of society. And humanity must come into that integral system, whether it likes to or not. And we need to explain this to people. How can you, with your personal individualistic attitude, which comes in an egoistic manner to profit off everyone, if I'm the owner of a business and I want to control the world where everyone will be my workers, that I'll give them 100 grams of food a day. I want to feel good. Okay, give them a kilo of food a day. Okay, my conscience is cleared, and they will all work, and I'll be the only business owner in the world. Okay, there'll be a few others, but they'll be less than me. I want to be prouder than them, etc. I'll have with her to drink coffee or play poker. But at the end of the day, this is what I want. Who am I doing it for? I want to fill myself as much as possible. The more that people are lesser than me, the better. You have to have like a connection, competition. There has to be a game here. But I have to be in charge. So no matter how much you pretend to be like concerned for your workers and everything, you're not really concerned. You're only looking after them to the extent that you need them to take advantage of them. There's no love or mutual connection. That's not what's looking over your relation with them, mutual love and everything, but just simple personal profit. Is it worth it for me or not worth it for me? And if it's not worth it, tomorrow it won't be. Is that mutuality? How can we advance society in this way to the future society? That's the question. If we're looking at economic approaches throughout history, the breakthrough was always at a time of crisis. Whenever there's a process in humanity, the new attitude has to rest on some ideological platform and give real tools. So the question is, first question, how does the economy reach balance based on the classic capitalistic system where there's many little players playing their economic game? And at the end of the day, the multitude of players brings balance. In the communist system, if we don't take into account the few people managing everything, that's the second system. As a result of the 29 crash, they say, no, you can't just leave the economy to be managed. You have to intervene. The balance, you reach a state where the government has to intervene in critical points, pumps things in there, and to bring about growth. What you say, I completely disagree. Excuse me. First of all, 100, 200 years ago, there were families that were managing the world. This is known. That's one. They allow the small businesses to run beneath their feet, like children among adults. It's all under their control. That's clear. They manage the world, not countries and not armies and not anything. That's one thing. The second thing, the fact that the economy allows countries and governments to intervene, it doesn't want to deal with it. It doesn't itself want to think about the social problems of the people. And therefore, it gives a few pennies to the government to look after the people. But actually, I don't understand you. You're economists. The world is managed by the economic system. True or false? Yes. And not by the political system or the social system or other systems. Only the economic system. This economic system determines everything. And it built beneath itself governments, cultural systems, etc. It builds it. The economic system. And therefore, when you say the governments did this and that, they don't do anything. They only deal with what the economy gives them to deal with. That's what a government deals with at the end of the day. Every single government. And the economic system gives governments a few dollars to look after the people, to manage the people, to give them benefits, etc. That's it. Don't say that, give us some other format. It's a warping. This is what we see. This is what people don't see. People can't see it actually, but this is what's happening. So newspapers and media and war, armies, it's all in the hands of economists, of the economy. So what's next? So what I said before, that what you said that people don't see it, it's true. It doesn't change anything. Now we have to come and start giving the people a method. For the first time now, the people who was just some garbage, Then they brought them to the villages and made them socio somehow, workers, factories, etc. Now we see that suddenly this mass that doesn't understand anything, that doesn't manage anything, that is completely managed through governments, it's being organized. They're being managed by those real tycoons, not the ones that we know, but the ones higher up even. The question is, what we see now, instead of this pyramid that we have at the moment, it has to become rounder. How are we going to do it? Or will it come through destruction, world wars? Otherwise, the world will get some other formation. The values will get some other implementation. We're standing in front of a revolution, internal revolution of a person. A person is changing. Wisdom of Kabbalah is saying that we develop through the ego, and now we're going to stop to develop. Now we have to make the ego round. The ego now has to look after the public. Can you imagine that this pyramid will become some smooth, round thing? But if it blows up, if all the parts come into the round part, if by nobody having anything and all becoming destroyed, that's the formation that nature is bringing us to, and that's how it will come about. How can we digest this situation time after time to come from the pyramid shape to a round shape? That's the problem. I'm looking for advice. I'm looking for theories. How is it possible? To get to the theory, we have to understand what we're waiting for at the end from an ideological point of view. So we're economists, and our goal is not to wait for things to blow up. But first of all, how will we agree with the future format? That's exactly the idea. Whoever doesn't have, then it'll just be better for him. But the people at the top will have to give something up. How will they give something up? Why are we not capable of showing? Why didn't Bala Sulam show the profit? Why didn't he invest in explaining in a nice way the benefits to the method? He says you have to study. It's not just any studying. Through studying, a person changes. That all your studies that you learned up until now, we learned how to implement our egoistic desires in a competitive, most effective, egoistic way so that we'll have more than others, we'll be more successful than others. Now we have to go into the integral studies that together we learn in a completely different manner around the table together. We have the system. Through the system, we're starting to understand what's happening if we connect. What desire, what force, what new unity reality can we build if we bring all our tools, all our desires and thoughts to a common plate. We are starting to create here a new essence that is called the integral system. That's the new integral reality that we're starting to feel, that the cells that are connecting to a new body, to one body, and that body is starting to live. And if we start doing it, we'll feel this flow between us, the new life. That's the nature's intention, to bring us to the new existence. Studies are not just studies. It's creating this additional force, this awareness, this new awareness. And then we can all live from that connection between us, like the cells that understand that they can't disperse, because then they have this minimal feeling of life in a program that they need to come to one body. That's the only point of our existence. So we need this education. Education is not just knowledge. It's building in us new lackings, new desires for connection, so that in this connection we feel the new reality where we have all our thoughts and desires together in the center between us. It's something that we don't feel at the moment. So we can't talk about it until we bring people to this taste, that he starts to taste what's happening in connection. And when he tastes it, you don't have to explain to him. He understands that it's the new reality. It's the next stage of our evolution. And that's how we'll advance. So now the question is, how will we obligate people to participate in a few meetings, possibly, maybe 2 or 3 meetings? How will we bring them to participate in this integral? But it's an internal tool. We have 2 or 3 meetings. How can you create that in 2 or 3 meetings? That's my problem. That leave to me. You'll see that it'll be like that. We see even from one meeting, he starts to get a taste. He starts to understand that there's a different opportunity, a very special opportunity. That's how he feels. To the extent that he'll agree to the method, not right away, but he'll see that there's some new rationality here, that he couldn't see it before. That we'll connect. How will we connect? How will I compromise? Here he starts to feel collective profit that is greater than what he's giving up. Even in an egoistic manner, it's worth it for him to come to this profit. It's worth it for him to be connected to others because he feels in this security, a good feeling, connection, warmth. There's some type of fulfillment, satisfaction from the connection, more than he's paying for and what he's giving up. What's he giving up on? Competition, problems, issues that he has today that are escalating. He sees it differently. He doesn't see it differently. Okay, so we'll wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow will come a greater blow. And we'll give him another workshop, and then we'll help him choose. On the one hand, he'll have a bad blow from behind, and we'll give him this taste from ahead, and then he'll decide. I'm trying to understand how the competition will be realized in the integral society. For example, today, if I'm producing something, I decide on quantities that will give me maximum profit. On what basis will I decide what quantity to produce in the integral world? I don't know. I'm not an economic expert, but just like today, it comes in the pyramid shape that we don't know. Then it will also, there'll be a council of wisdom, people that understand what the integral system is and they feel it inside. And they determine the general lines of what's happening in the world. And then it will trickle down to other levels in economy and industry, lower ones, and so on and so forth. That's what I think. In some way, the pyramid has to exist. Not each person is capable in the integral format to manage something. It appears to me that it looks like it'll be some wisdom council, that they will be the excellent. The competition won't be in economy. If we just need to find the things that are lacking in society and fill them. Why does there have to be competition? You said there'll be competition on how valuable people are to society. Okay, yes, if you can be more valuable to society in a new way, in producing the necessary things, great. But I don't decide how much to produce. But it's not you that goes and produces something because it appears to you that you can be better than others. First of all, you need to understand that the approach has to be integral from everyone. What are you profiting from that you are making things cheaper, evaluation from society? Okay, so great. So suggest, if the society accepts it, if they accept it, they will. If they don't, they won't. So there's no competition at the economic level. No, not at the economic level. Then you're going back to the capitalistic format again. So the model is, there's a central planning. Somebody decides on the quantities, just like in our bodies. The brain is in charge of all functionality. There's no other thing that can cancel itself against the brain. You talked about like the Wisdom Council. I can imagine the future society. We spoke in the GS3, the G20 committees and G8. Some are stronger, some are less strong. How does a meeting like this work to solve the global crisis? It's not a crisis anymore. There'll be stages until we reach the good state, this complete state. Let's think together. I think first of all, we need to bring everyone knowledge about what we're doing. Because if we're talking about a round world, then everyone has to participate in it somehow. First of all, we have to create the new educational system. We have the media to do it. We have internet, radio, television. We have to start educating all people in every country, in every language, what situation we're in and what we need. From there, we have to start developing systems where all these big audiences, to the extent they begin accepting this education and changing, how all these masses, we can bring them closer to one another. This is through participation. mutual participation and integral mutual education, the way we sit around a table, this is how we need to bring it to the people. This is first of all. We don't understand the essence of education. That the people that go through this education, through exercises, workshops that they partake, they're getting an inner power, inner knowledge, inner feeling, inner philosophy, a different approach to life. That life is truly the future life, that I come out of myself and live in unity. That all people are actually 7 billion cells of one body. We start to get this feeling. And then in accordance, everything changes. By changing our approach, all the things change. Personal ties, international ties, everything changes. And also take into account how thoughts and desires and of the masses influence each and every one of us. To what strength? To the extent that everyone's under pressure from the environment. How quickly he'll change. This we can implement now in our situation, in our world, and we'll see it in a few weeks. We'll see changes. There's no problem. Not a few weeks. If we do it when we do it in schools with kids or with older people, we see from the start, right from the start, we see a change. And they themselves are talking about it. It's not some joke. We do these things in prisons with people who are in prison. It's not regular people in the street. These are really hardcore people. And suddenly, they don't understand the changes they're going through in the systems that are there, in the relations that are there between these cells. We don't understand that education is the solution. You can't bring a person into the new framework and obligate him like they wanted to do in Russia after the revolution, that they did it through oppression, that they killed 40 million people to implement socialism. And what did they achieve? We can't do that. Only not by force. It has to do through it has to be done through recognition, desire. What do you mean desire? That nature is demanding that we connect, and whether we like it or not, we are obligated to. It's against our desire, but you're developing inside steps that you already have a desire to carry out the laws of nature. I want to go back to Bala Sulam's text. He talks about in the previous paragraphs that we have to sit down on the bench and study and create a new science and a new life. Let's go to the quote number 4. I doubt it if there's someone in the movement that will be able to grasp things the way they are, because it's not easy for a 100-year-old to succeed in his studies, to get up once and erase everything he learned in the past and sit down and study like a physicist that he's demanding from the Socialist Party. How can this be passed on? Bala Sulam is talking about this difficulty in changing the way a person thinks. And you're saying, according to the wisdom of Kabbalah, he'll get an inner tool and know how to behave properly. He'll be able to agree. He'll be able to participate. To act is another thing, but it depends on the person. A regular person works out of agreement. He doesn't activate himself. There has to be agreement from the head of the pyramid. How is this wheel going to start moving? Through opinion. You're always talking about that there's 4 or 5 families that manage everything, but that's going to break soon. Gradually, if we start doing it gradually, and if not, it'll be through breaking. It'll break up into pieces, and we must collect it into a ball. Let's go forward a bit. He says in quote number 5, if we are going to sit quietly regarding the workers because they're not on the verge of a breakdown completely. And another sure thing, there's nothing endangering the workers. And we can really lose things. He's really warning us, like before the Holocaust. Until we don't implement this, then we're under the same threat. You don't think it's continuing and it can't break out at any moment? Here he's talking about the economic level. How does it connect between the economic system and say that it's like a real threat to our existence? Who's guilty of all the problems in the world? The Jews. Haven't you heard it from economists in the world? Maybe Chinese soon. At the end of the day, everyone will turn everything around and say that we're responsible for everything. You can bring lists of Jews and everything, and economy, industry. How many are there? 100,000, 200,000. What about all the rest that are just regular workers? No. They say this whole nation is guilty. Where? Why? Because we have the method. And we are not realizing our role of being a light unto the nations. In Israel, is it possible to build an economic system that will be an example? We have to. Especially because of that. We have to here build an economy that will serve as a sample. Example. Why are we dependent? You're not dependent. You're not dependent. They are saying you're dependent on them, that you're causing all bad. And you'll see that in this way you'll cause all good. And truly they are dependent on you and you're not dependent on them. Just like that. How is it so half of my stuff in Israel here I sell abroad. Soon you won't have anyone to sell to. Either it will come in an anti-Semitism, either it will come through anti-Semitism, or just because the world is going into a crisis. So all your export, you can eat it yourself. What else? Import, what will you import? Who will buy it? Who needs it? What do you mean? Where will we bring gas, oil? You're going to pay for it? Will the Iranians bring me barrels of oil? You'll manage without. I can't manage without. I have to warm the house. I have cars. What cars? Take a camel and that's it. I'm serious. Why do you think you're continuing with the same method, with the same standard of living? The fact that you have a car, it's not basic, no. Not a car, not a house. You'll make a tent in the garden, like some Bedouin. You don't understand who you're standing in front of. I'm sorry. You're an economist. You don't understand that if there's a crisis, it's not just a crisis in the exchange that we're falling a bit. If you don't have import, if you don't have export, what happens with your country? What's there to see? There's a tiny country here. It's 1 kilometer across, and everyone's going back to living in the desert. That's it. Today, for example, how can we make a war on another country? We just close off the economic flow, and we see that they can exist. We pressurize them, and all of a sudden there's starvation there and all kinds of stuff. So how do you suggest that there won't be import, export, that will be like isolated? Is that what I'm suggesting? I'm saying that that's what will happen. It's not that far off. I think that in the coming year, 2013, we'll see it. We'll see it in a very advanced form. What will you do afterwards? I don't know. Maybe it will obligate you to think about a different economy. Bala Sulam talks about that we have to come to a crisis and then come to the new state. But again, if I come to a doctor and he gives me an X-ray and he says, listen, I discovered something in you, go quick to get an operation. And he sends you to get some kind of therapy. So I go and give myself therapy. Only an expert will know. I do what he says, and then I get better without going through the whole disease and without losing life. It all depends when we grasp the disease. We don't want to grasp. It's not visible to us. We still have experts that are sitting here in our world that are saying there's no disease. What do you suggest? I don't hear from you. In the last years, I don't hear from economists any advice. What are you suggesting? You're experts for everything that's happening. There's lots of advice. Where? They're not really working, but there's lots of, there's no end. Some are saying print money. Some say we lower the interests. It's all clear that it's not injection into a wooden leg. They're operating. It's all just PR. Printing money is. It's clear what it gives us. So there's no method. Economy knows how to work with things that it knows, printing money, all the things that it knows. But now we're talking about something completely new. It's not based on deleting the previous systems, but really something completely different. I think that if we're talking about economists, well, you're saying, why don't the economists bring solutions? It's not even in their toolbox to bring a solution like this. We'll still need to work with money and industry and commerce. But we're only changing the main ingredient, that each and every act must bring us collective benefit and not personal benefit. And in that, we're completely changing everything and all the calculations, but the calculations remain. I see some factory. I see a gas station, some big factory. What are they? They don't have calculations? They can't, they don't have merchandise. The world doesn't stop. We're dealing with the surplus. This whole balloon is going to come down to a rational level, but everything that exists according to needs. It's all things. It's not the profit in money managing us, but rather in rationality. To the extent that I waste less, cause the ecology, to the extent that I bring good to society, there has to be a private and general definition, maximum benefit with the least investment. It's not an economic formula. It's egoistic. Yes, we're egoistic. Great. We want to profit as much as possible with as little investment as possible. Who profits? All of us. That's the formula. One family. But take into account that nature is also ours and we live in it. The planet, the atmosphere. How do we maintain everything? And we want to live in the most maximum manner by causing minimal damage, maximum profit. There are very, very clear things here. In math, we created things like this and formulas like this in university. From A to B, there's a train. The distance between them is 100 kilometers. So the question is, what speed, what maximum speed does the train have to go to waste as little gas as possible? And it will go securely between stations. Take into account that we're wearing down the train and security of the tracks and everything. You have to take 1,000 things into account. How much it has to accelerate at the beginning and then gradually go down. And how it has to stop more or less, etc. How effective it is for saving and all kinds of systems, brakes, gas, time, all this. You take all these things into calculation, you arrange them, you arrange it all into a formula and equals maximum. It's a simple formula. Do it. What's the problem? The same thing here. We have a basis in our math and economy and everything, how to work with these systems. We're not going up to the sky. Just the beneficial, who profits. This profit is called society or nature. We're taking into account everything together. We can't not just take into account the ecology so that landlord is nature, and we're part of it. I think it's very rational. It's necessary for what we're discovering in the world right now. Can you take in? You said nature. You said the climate. In another week, there's a tsunami destroying all the wheat in a certain place. We're talking about a formula with a lot of things that you can't see, but suddenly you see that you're starting to take into account nature. You see you can take all those invisible things into account. It won't ruin anything because you're taking nature into account. So the right economic method is what can bring the world to peace and prevent all the sufferings that you described before, because we're in a round world. If I try to be in balance with all the systems, why shouldn't I invite from them all kinds of reactions, undesirable reactions? For the train to get from one point to the other, we need fuel. And this fuel is also a result of a person, how much he accepts things in a certain way, because the economy knows how to take into account oil, people's pride, a desire to be more than others is fuel. The question is if Bala Sulam is, when he's talking about the socialistic point, equality is a means. That's the truth. It's not the goal. It's one of the conditions that we have to reach to be in balance with nature. That's what's demanded of us by us researching the system. It's a round system where we're all dependent on one another. It's more or less, in a relative manner, we're in equality. What does that mean? I look after my heart more than my leg, because if my heart will be broken, it's a problem. If my leg is broken, I can live with it. Not all the systems are equal. Everyone works for the sake of the general system. Everyone based on its importance, its path, etc. So equality at the end of the day is just that there's concern, relative proportional concern for each thing in society, each system, in accordance with how important or less important it is to the general society. And then it varies in our dynamics. There's some that look after ecology, and maybe now it's so important because we ruined the planet. We have to invest all our powers there. And millions of people who are now losing work, then we have to take that whole force, that whole power that we used to use to destroy the ecology, to produce all kinds of rags or cars and all kinds of rubbish. That through that we destroyed the planet. Now we maybe need to take all that power in money and workforce and everything to invest it in cleaning the planet. So you have what to do. And in accordance, or after that or before that, we have to invest in education. We have to develop an education system, but always take into account the general good. Maybe we'll read the last quote. We can't compare the destruction to the destruction of the movement, because only slaves we were sold, but the security of the slaves and wives. So we can't miss the hour. We need to sit down on the learning bench and research the socialist idea again based on the conflicts and facts that are coming up today. And we have to, there's nothing more important than life and death. We have no choice. We must advance to the direction, call it socialism, equality. In the integral system, we have to learn what an integral system is. I remember I learned it in university, in cybernetics, these systems. We have a mathematic basis. We control these systems. We understand. But how to implement it, that's what we need an integral education for. Sit down on the learning bench. He'll make a bench. He'll bring people. Okay, there's a bench here. Who's going to stand there and explain? Only Kabbalists. Because they see these things ahead of time. Balasunam students. So what do you mean research the socialist idea from scratch? Research it, what it has today, so that we won't reach real danger. To get out of it all the correct things for our time, that is revealing the lacking to implement it, to realize it, to reach his system, actually. Yes, but it's not the socialism that we know from all kinds of sources, but it rather has a few points that are correct for our time. And the problem is not in it in itself, but how in the education system we can bring people this awareness, understanding, desire to see the better future. Because it doesn't come. If we advance through nature, it's just blows and destruction. If we want to advance ourselves, it's only through the gradual soft education that we have to bring to a person, to each and every person. Based on what criteria can we define? I don't have criteria. I don't think socialism that we had then, there's anything in it that we can take from it. Nothing. Because it was not based on education, on changing a person. It was based on oppression. We'll all be equal. We will get rid of possessions. That's it. We'll clean everyone. Everyone's hungry? Great. Now we can make you equal. Everyone's starving? Great. We'll give everyone 100 grams of bread, 200 grams of bread. That's what they wanted to do. It's cruelty. It doesn't come from a feeling of connection, love. It comes from oppression. You're dealing with a person's ego. You're raising him to another level. The whole world is connected? No. No, not at all. There's no situation like that. You leave him as an egoist. He's only interested in himself. What does he care about the world? Just the opposite. You have to bring everyone to having basic necessities, and not that half the world is starving. You have to bring the world the method of correction, to raise them up, to educate them, to excite them, to fill them with joy, hope. Apart from basic necessities for eating, also the inner nutrition, spiritual filling, it's completely different than that socialism. And it's completely different than what you have in Scandinavia and all kinds of places. What kind of socialism is that? So we have to build a completely new system, actually. Yes, we have nothing else. Only from the Kabbalists. Okay. So our time is up. We're at the end of another show. Thank you, Rev Laitman. Thank you to all the friends here in the studio. Our show, we've come to the end of another show, The Solution. Be with us in the next ones. Thank you and goodbye.